I just think a lot of the mentality that I was taught and all of that from a young age, like, has really stuck with me, up into my adult years. There's definitely a lot of discipline there. There's a lot of like work for very little reward and a lot of patience. So I think like a lot of that kind of mindset carried across like a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different like parts of my life.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is an artist and DJ from Sydney, Australia, who has been killing it in the bass music scene. She is out here living her dream, playing festivals and headlining stages all over the world. I am so excited to have this opportunity to speak with my good friend, Sippy. What is up?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. You were one of the first people that I thought of when I wanted to start this podcast because I saw you go from 0 to 100. And I'm very, very curious to dive into hear about what that process has been like for you.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm excited to talk about it. And I don't know, also sometimes sitting and doing things like this, it makes me kind of stop and be like, oh, okay, like this is what's happened. Like kind of helps me process a lot of it too. So
yeah,
it works both ways.
Yeah. Well, let's start off with where you're at right now. Mm-hmm. What's going on in your world? What does your life look like? What do you have going on?
So at the moment, I'm based out of LA. I'm over here for touring because I'm pretty much touring America nonstop, doing music full time. The year sort of like changes depending on what season I'm in. So sometimes I'll go through a period of 3 months where I'm touring almost like 4 days a week playing shows. And then some periods it'll be a little bit more relaxed. So I'll be playing a show once every 2 weeks or so. And then during the week I've got a home studio that I'm working out of and just writing music and doing as much as I can on that side of things when I'm in the studio.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations on creating all of this for yourself.
And it was a big move, that's for sure.
Yeah, and there was a point where everything that you're doing right now was just a dream.
Yeah.
Just an idea, just a vision.
Yes.
So take me back to that point when you had the thought of, I want to be a DJ. I want to travel the world playing my music. Take me back to that moment. When did you make that decision?
So, I mean, the first moment that I had that thought and that decision was years ago. It was actually probably around the time we first met, I think. At the time, I was DJing already, but it was all just like, I guess, for fun and my own enjoyment and my own passion. I just really loved it. I always thought music was kind of going to be a side thing, and I really loved it. And then I met a DJ through playing at Chinese Laundry in Sydney called Bear Grylls, RJ.
Shout out RJ. Love you, bro.
Shout out RJ. He came over, he played a show, we became friends, we started chatting, and I don't know whether he just saw something in me or what, but he was like, you should come over to America and like see what's out there and what it's really all about. Anyway, so I was like, all right, let's do it. So I came over here. I was only here for like maybe 10 days max. I don't even know if I was here for that long. And he just took me to all these shows around America and just to see, like I wasn't playing or anything, just to kind of see what the scene was like. And I just could not believe it. Like I just saw like, how many people were into it over here, how big the scene was, how diverse it was. But the thing that made me go, oh, I can do this is like I saw the DJs up on stage and I was like, I can do that. I know I'm capable. I know I can get myself there. And I know once I'm up there, like, it's going to feel so natural to me.
I find it interesting that RJ, Bear Grylls, it sounds like he saw your potential, which helped you see your potential.
Yeah, I mean, I was living in Sydney, Australia, so my world in terms of all this was quite small. Like, yes, we have a scene there, but it's nowhere near like it is over here. There's the population of Australia is so much smaller, you know, so even if you're playing big shows, they're not on the scale that they are here.
Yeah.
And he definitely saw my potential, which was awesome. And then when he said all this and brought me over, like, it helped me recognize the same thing that he did.
Yeah.
From then, when I came over here and saw all of that, I pretty much went back and I was like, you can do this and you're going to kill it. And so from that point, I was like, okay, like, my goal is to get over to the States and tour over in the States and kind of build that up.
Something unlocked inside of you.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Yeah. And I find this really cool because as someone who is a coach, and a lot of my job is to help people see their potential and to guide them and to mentor them and to support them. And, you know, oftentimes we don't actually see our own greatness until somebody else sort of sees that in us. And I know both you and I come from sports backgrounds. I played rugby. You played not rugby.
All sorts of sports.
But
touch football.
Which is like Australian Aussie rules rugby. It's kind of a different variation.
Like rugby. Yeah, it's kind of like rugby, but just no kicking and there's 6 players.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Very similar rules.
And so that was such a big part of my journey was I didn't know that I was could be a collegiate All-American rugby player, or I had the potential to be, an award-winning athlete until I had a coach that saw that in me and spoke into that and guided and supported that. So I'm curious to hear about your sports background and what the background of being an athlete, how that maybe contributed to you being where you are today.
I mean, I did play touch football from probably like 13 years old upwards until like now. But in terms of the whole sport thing, that started a lot earlier. I guess the place that it started was I was a ballerina from 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I started that at 3 and went all the way till I was 18. I was very big into like, I guess you guys call it track here. So I was like a big runner.
Yeah.
And then in between I was always like all year round, I was doing ballet and track.
Yeah.
And then in the seasons I was playing, soccer and touch football. Yeah. And then, sprinkle in a couple of random sports in there as well.
And were your parents really encouraging you to go and do all of these things? Like, or were you genuinely like, I really want to be a ballerina at 3?
It was that. Yeah. My parents are like the opposite of pushy. Like they're like, do you think, like that sort of thing. But the thing that kind of pushed me to do it was I have an older sister. She's 2 years older than me. And we've always been best friends. We're almost completely opposite, but she's that little bit older. So everything she did, I just wanted to be like her. So she started ballet. So I was like, I want to start ballet. She started soccer. I wanted to start soccer. It was this whole thing where, my sister, I just always like, I looked up to her so much and I always like wanted to be kind of just like her. But the difference in us two is I'm very committed and motivated and I'll stick with something, whereas she's like, I'll give this a go. And then she's like, not really into it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of ended up sticking with a lot of it. And I think my nature too is just quite like, I'm fairly good at like self-motivating. I'm pretty patient with things. So like that meant I kind of stuck with a lot of it. So I started that at a very young age, like a lot of the sport.
Yeah.
And even though like I stopped doing ballet when I was about 18. And I just think a lot of the mentality that I was taught and all of that from a young age, like has really stuck with me, up into my adult years. There's definitely a lot of discipline there. There's a lot of like work for very little reward and a lot of patience. So I think like a lot of that kind of mindset carried across like a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different like parts of my life.
Yeah, that's huge. How important is that discipline and patience when it comes to being an artist and being a music producer?
It's like so imperative. It's really difficult to continue to maintain a successful career without those elements. You do see like some artists who are just kind of like, they go with their creativity, they go on a whim and it all seems to work out. But majority of people, it comes from discipline and hard work. In this industry, there is no structure. There's not someone telling you, hey, you've got practice at this time, you've got to be working on Ableton at this time, or you have to finish this work by then. You know, it's very open format, and it means like if you're not disciplined and you don't show up, there's no one to blame it on. You can't be like, oh, so-and-so didn't do their work. It's kind of all on you.
And I think that's a big distinction is like in sports, you have to be disciplined, which there is a structure there. You show up, you just have to be disciplined to show up and participate in the program.
Mm-hmm.
As an artist, you have to be self-disciplined. And there's a difference between
difference.
being, I'm very disciplined. Like you tell me where to be, what to do, I'll show up and I'll do it. But if I have to do it alone with nobody holding my hand, with no,
exactly.
no coach, no program, then I'm like, I'm not really that self-disciplined, if I'm honest. and that's a hard thing.
It's interesting because once I like started doing music full time back in Australia, I actually ended up getting myself a personal trainer because I was putting all that discipline into music. I was like, I don't have any discipline left for working out. And yes, I was still working out, but it was like very like same. I was just going for a run every time, doing a little bit of like, I'll do some push-ups and some sit-ups, and it was very monotonous.
Yeah.
And then eventually I was like, I ended up getting a personal trainer, and that was like the best thing I could have done for myself because, there was someone there saying, hey, here's where to be and what to do. And for me, it was a great break because I never had that. And it was really nice just for, 2 hours, 3 hours a week to just go somewhere and be told, this is all you have to do. And once you do it, you're done. And then you leave and it's ticked off the list and there's no more you can do. And that was like a really like good thing for me once I kind of changed my lifestyle to that.
Yeah. And you have a manager now, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So does your manager provide that kind of trainer support when it comes to being an artist, or is a lot of that still on you?
Most of it is definitely still on me. We've actually recently like changed our structure to like really be a lot more helpful for me in that sense where there's like weekly accountability. So, we have our call every week, and that helps me have kind of a deadline to get certain things done and also like keep me on top of certain tasks.
Nice.
And also keep me motivated, like sometimes there'll be a report of like, this is what's happening and this is what's going well. And so like that obviously is like kind of a motivator for me. And then sometimes it's like, we're having a problem here. How do we fix it? So in that sense, it's really good. The other thing that he is really good with as well, he really knows how to talk to me in terms of to get me going creatively. Once like you go into music full time and it becomes like your job, like it becomes your livelihood. So if you don't perform and you don't do well, you don't get paid, you don't eat, you don't pay your rent. You know what I mean? And it becomes this crazy different pressure. And, sometimes it means when you go and create, you start thinking in that mindset rather than a purely creative mindset. And he is really good at kind of getting me out of that mindset. It's a very different way of speaking than I'm used to. Like it's different to when I used to have a coach that's like pushing and motivating. It's a little bit more subconscious. He'll give me a few cues and next thing I know, I'm full on in a crazy creative mindset that was kind of instigated by like some of the things that he'd kind of put out there. And I know it's a really hard thing to do because even when he, says it to me or like does it to me, I'm like, oh, holy shit. Like, like I'm kind of caught off guard.
Yeah. When you made that decision to really become an artist, were you looking at it from the perspective of, I want this to be my career and this is a business and there's all this other stuff that goes into it besides just making music? Like, were you thinking about that, or were you just like, I want to just chase this adventure and see where it goes?
It wasn't like a chase adventure. Like I was very, I don't know if planned is the right word, but like almost strategic.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons that I did it was because I was like, I think this is going to be really hard and I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do it. Like I believe in myself that I can do it, but I'm also not sure I'm going to be able to do it. Back then, on the one hand, I was like, I really think that I can do this and I think I can kill it. But on the other hand, I was like, this was one of the first things for me that was super challenging. And I love challenging myself. So from that point of view, I was like, this is going to be really hard. So I want to do it to like prove that I can. That was kind of my motivation behind it. I saw the full career, but I also was like it feels like natural that I would be doing this for the rest of my life. And I think I'm naturally like, it comes natural to me.
Yeah.
And I was really up for the challenge.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they're kind of the things that went into it, I guess.
I love that. So you were really motivated by having a big challenge in front of you. Like that drove you. So right now, what's the next big challenge that's exciting and motivating you to keep going?
I mean, there's kind of a few, because like sometimes I do need to take a step back and just like appreciate how far I have come.
Yes.
I'm really bad at that, and I need to do that a lot more. But, you know, the biggest thing moving out to America, especially for people like internationally, to get into this full time, it's really tough. It's financially, it's really difficult. You're paying for visas every 3 years or less, depending, which can be, you know, from 4 to 10K every 3 years. Then you've got withholding tax, which is an extra 30%. You know, there's all these kind of financial things that make it really tough. I kind of have like two places that I'm trying to build to. One is to be in a point with that business side of things where I feel comfortable, relaxed, and confident, which means, you know, I'm at a point where I can invest money rather than I'm just trying to survive this period, you know what I mean? Which it's weird because I had to treat moving to America like I was starting this business again.
Yeah.
And as much as I want to talk about being an artist and creative, like there is a big part of it that's a business.
You're an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
100%. You're a business owner.
Yeah, and the first few years in starting a business, like you are not making money.
And yeah, this is such a big thing that I think is a huge distinction in the way of thinking that I think a lot of artists miss out on. Is they're just like, I just want to make music and have fun and be creative, and I'm passionate about it, and that's awesome, and that needs to be there. But it's like, if you truly want to make your dreams happen, if you truly want to make your goals happen, you also really have to have a business mindset and understand that this is an entrepreneurial journey, and you can't only make music, you have to do all the other stuff as well.
All the other stuff.
And you have to like treat this like a startup, like a business. And I think a lot of people are missing out on that.
Yeah, and it is really hard because it's like a different part of your brain to the creative side. So that's a difficult part. But the other kind of goal that I'm pushing for now is like, you know, I've been over here about a year and a half now. Things are going really well. I'm starting to build like a really cool community around me. And so now it's starting to get up into those like headline tours and starting to build that into like a really cool like touring headline shows.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah. So that's kind of the next step, which it looks like this year, you know, we're starting to push more and more into that, which is awesome and exciting, but also very scary.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
So that's kind of the next spot. And personally also the other thing is just like, this isn't really the right way to put it, but like I want to kind of relax into it, you know, like I want to really start getting good in that like routine, whatever routine means, really kind of lean into it, start understanding myself more, start understanding like how I operate and how to get the most out of myself.
Yeah.
Because that's super important as well. And that got really thrown off when I moved from Australia because I spent my whole life, you know, kind of getting the most out of myself up until then, because my whole structure of my world was the same. And then I kind of moved over here and it was like everything was different. So
I really want to dig into that a little bit and hear about your process. It seems to me with a lot of people that I talk to that there was at least a period where they just had to put the blinders on and just really dig in and be like, hey, I'm going to say no to every party. I'm going to turn off my phone and I'm going to just really, really grind and put in the hours. So I'm curious, like, if like what your process was, especially in that stage. And then also I would love to hear about what that process looks like now at the stage that you're in today.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had that period. I think everyone has to have it. And then as time goes on, like I still kind of have those periods, but they look a little bit different now. I had that initial period like fairly early on, probably 2016, and it was when I was running a business over in Australia. I was studying at Icon, and it was just like full steam ahead. All I can do is work. I'm either working at my job to pay for Icon, or I was doing my Icon work.
Yeah, you were hustling.
I was hustling.
Hustling hard.
Yeah, and I was young enough where I wasn't as affected by how little sleep I was getting. Because
how much were you sleeping at that time, or not sleeping?
Anywhere, yeah. There was a period of so I had a period of 4 months where I worked 7 days a week.
Wow. There we go.
Yeah. In that 4-month period, it was anywhere between 2 to 5 hours a night.
Wow.
And then usually once a week I could manage this huge catch up where I would get 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah.
But the 2 to 5 hours were just I remember I was researching sleep cycles and doing this whole thing and trying to make it work. And I remember at the time too, 2 of my, family members were really sick and one passed away. It was an absolute clusterfuck of a year.
Yeah.
But I was definitely not sleeping for a lot of that year. But but that was the grind year for sure.
Yeah. And what was the result of that?
On the one hand, I did learn obviously a lot. I progressed a lot in that year. The year before that and that year, I also, after all that, very much developed. It's almost like I worked in this rotation year in, year out, especially with this job that I had, where I would have this crazy stressful period that would last for anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And then month 10/11, something would happen with my body, whether it was okay, I started getting blurred vision, or I started having chest pain, all this sort of stuff. Anyway, all turns out that it was anxiety and things like that have bubbled up from me just suppressing everything for 6 to 9 months. So that was obviously a big learning experience. And as much as it feels shitty in the moment, the amount that I learned just from myself through my own body and all that sort of stuff in those even those couple of years was really incredible.
Knowing what you know now, would you have done things differently, or do you feel like that was kind of necessary?
I think it was kind of necessary. I don't regret it because of how much I learned in that period of time. Not only obviously through the school and the teaching and, going so hard and fast, but the amount that I learned about myself, about my body, about my mind, about life in that period of time, they're all things that I will take through the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. You stretched yourself. You stretched yourself beyond your comfort zone and beyond what you thought your limitations were. And it's in stretching yourself, we discover what we're really capable of and what we're really made of, right? And sometimes we stretch ourselves too far and we get injured and we have to reel it back in a little bit, but you'll never know what's there until you actually stretch beyond that place of comfort.
And I think that period also gave me confidence in understanding how much you can get done in a day. I mean, I also don't encourage people to lose sleep. I think sleep is one of the most important things.
Yes.
It is the most important thing for you. And even now as a touring DJ where it's sleep may not be, it's not the easiest thing to get. I very much prioritize that. And mostly with touring, I do fairly well with keeping it. Even if the time zones are slightly off, I still manage to keep it pretty regulated. But in saying that, how much you can get done in a day if you're, smart about it and efficient with yourself and kind of learn and understand how you work best. I learn a lot about how much you can kind of get done with your time during that period.
So what's your process and approach to that as far as maximizing your time and the results that you have?
Honestly, the biggest thing is really understanding yourself. That's going to help a lot, especially when it comes to as an artist. Everyone does work slightly differently. Their brain works slightly differently. So taking breaks or what makes you feel inspired and all that sort of stuff is very different person to person. There's kind of the macro and the micro in terms of what you can do. The macro, which I think is more global and universal, is very much looking after your body, looking after your mental health, looking after your sleep, these kind of bigger picture things, and putting in the time, making sure you're giving yourself ample time you know, not putting yourself under too much like pressure or stress, whether that be, you know, not too many deadlines or you're not putting too many things in a day or like, you know, whatever it may be. That's kind of like the more bigger picture global sort of stuff. And then there's like more the micro in your day to day, or like, I know it's not day to day when it comes to like our sort of way of life, but like, you know, your day to day routine. And some things that I'm like a big believer in is like no phones in the studio and no phones next to your bed. Like they're just the two big ones. I can fall asleep with my phone like in the room or like near me, but like it's on do not disturb, it's on sleep, and I'm not tempted to like look at it. But I know a lot of people shouldn't. A lot of people should leave it downstairs. I used to do that. That's why now if it's in the room, I don't care, because my first thought isn't to pick up my phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think this comes back to looking at what you do as your job and as a career. And like, if you showed up at your job at like a 9 to 5 and were just on your phone all day or fucking off all day and not really getting anything done, like how long would you have that job? Right. And I think that's an important thing to think about. I remember I had an artist that I managed, one of the first artists I managed, who had a wife who would get up and go to her corporate job every day at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock and would come back at 5. So he was like, okay, well, if you're going to get up and go to work, I'm gonna be at my desk at 9 a.m. every day too, producing music. And he just had this focus, this laser focus, and this discipline. And just, it was 40 hours a week. He's like, this is my 9 to 5. I sit down and I produce from 9 to 5. When my wife gets home, I shut the computer off and we hang out. And, you know, he has his family life and manage that really, really well.
Yeah, that's definitely the approach I took when I first started doing music full time. It was very much like it's 9 till 5. You know, I clock in and I clock out. Like it's very much that sort of style. Now it's become a little bit different because my day looks a bit different and my weeks look a bit different. But in saying that, I do try, like today was 9 to 5, 100. Well, you know, I actually got in early today. You know, I started at 8:30, but you know, it's like that kind of approach. I put on clothes as if I'm going to work or a studio. I put on shoes. Like putting on shoes is like a big one.
I learned that lesson. That's like the biggest one, because I've been self-employed for 4 years now. I've been working for myself, so it's like there's such a difference of like, oh, you just wake up and you're wearing your like, you know, your shorts or
sloppy.
You're sloppy. I was
exactly.
like, I gotta like gel my hair, put on cologne, fucking take a shower. And not that I'm going out anywhere, but it just makes me feel completely different. It's like a trigger. It's so important.
Super important. Yeah. It's something that I've done for a long time, and I tell a lot of people to do, like get dressed, go to work, you know, do that kind of thing. Even if you're like, a lot of people have their studios in their room, but like first thing of the day, no matter who you are, what career you're in, whatever, make your bed.
Yes.
Make your bed always, then get up. And if your studio is even in the same room, put all your clothes on as if you're going to work, go out to the kitchen or like go out and then come back in and you're going to work. You know what I mean? And like the whole getting changed, putting your shoes on, that sort of thing is really important. You know, no phones in the studio is really great. And then there's other things like, you know, knowing when to take breaks. Some people take too many breaks. I'm kind of the person that like forces myself to stay in the room, but that's not always when I'm the most productive. You know, it's almost like I'm too scared to leave the room because that means I'm not getting work done. But the problem is I get in this like spiral where I'm not actually getting work done, and then I'm like, well, I should, you know, leave because, you know, take a break. But then I'm like, but then I haven't gotten the work done. And, you know,
it's the diminishing rate of return. The quality of the work maxes out at some point. So it's like,
sometimes you can get more done in 20 minutes than you can in 2 hours if you're, you know, like really on it. So, doing those sorts of things, like, and learning how that works, because it is different for different people. And the other thing is too, when you work, from home or you like work for yourself as well, like another one that I've found out recently that is important too is like, I also sometimes need to go out to places like a coffee shop. Or like Ralph's or whatever, you know, your grocery store, just to have random interactions with other people. Even especially when they're people you don't know, you know, it's just the little interactions. It gives you this kind of worldview that's like, okay, take me out of it all for a second.
It brings up a good point about sometimes I think the nature of being an artist as being this very lone wolf isolated path of it's like it's me and my creativity, especially as a music producer. It's like I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
everything by myself on my laptop, right? And there's it's so different from I just think a lot of other, especially if we go back to looking at sports where it's like,
Oh yeah.
it's about teamwork and we're doing this all together. And I think
Yeah.
that's also a big mindset shift as well to not play the lone wolf game and to recognize that anybody that is successful in the music industry has a team and is working with other people and
Yeah.
isn't in like a silo doing it alone, right? Whether that's on a
Yeah.
day to day or the bigger picture as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a very different mindset. Like, I mean, I did a lot of individual sports when I was younger, so I was kind of used to that. But I also always had like community and a team around me, even if we weren't, even if we were competing against each other. For some reason, it meant that like it still felt like community.
Yeah.
And I don't get that as much in music, even if there are some other musicians. Like sometimes some people are very like, they put themselves in there, I'm doing it alone kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do surround yourself with, a team that you're close to and connecting with, but also with other artists who are also trying to do the same thing that you are, like that can really help, your own process and not to kind of isolate yourself too much.
Yeah.
Because, obviously I understand isolating yourself to get work done, but then there's
a balance.
the too far.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So who is in your corner? Who are your peers? Who are the people that you lean on and get that support from?
I mean, I have like a bit of a diverse group, I guess. Like I have my manager, Harrison and Tony. So they're based over in Toronto, but they're obviously like that kind of side of work. And I bounce things off them plenty. But in terms of more like artists and kind of crew and that sort of thing, so I have one of my mates, one of my best friends who I've been best friends with since the start. His name's Adam. He goes by Dr. Werewolf. He's like a drum and bass producer from Australia. He was my mentor as I first sort of started coming up, and then eventually was very much like an accountability buddy, and now just is like one of my mates that I always send stuff to or ask advice on music, or he kind of helps me get out of my own head and vice versa.
Shout out Adam.
Yeah, shout out Adam. And then the Riot Boys, Daniel and Tom, like since I moved to LA, like I became very close with them. They have helped me a lot. Like I've always had Adam as we always bounce things back and forth, but we used to have in-person like studio time. And I was really missing that. And from Tom and Daniel, like it took me a little while to like kind of connect with them and become close with them. And we started having that kind of in-person studio time. So like they're definitely like a little crew that I like also helped me with like pulling myself out of, my sort of headspace that I'm in. And then I got like a whole bunch of friends in Denver. Like I've got Hayes and Backlash, they're kind of like my little crew sitting over there that sometimes it's music and sometimes it's just like we get the whole scene, but we're just here to be mates. Sometimes that's super important. And then also like just any of the guys that I've like toured with or supported. I've done like 2 big support tours for Dirt Monkey and Champagne Drip. And honestly, like having that time with those guys was really awesome for me. Even less so in the studio kind of vibes, and more just like seeing how they do it, understanding the process, and just like having that connection to other people who do it as well.
Yeah, I love that saying, and I've been really meditating on this a lot lately, that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so who are you surrounding yourself with? Right? And I think that's so important, and I see that as I look at the artists that I know that have done really, really well. You're usually surrounded by other artists that are doing really well, right? You have to be around other people that are hungry and that are driven. Have you had to separate yourself from certain people or habits or things that you kind of had to leave behind in order to get to that next level?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think I mean, it's interesting. Like, I'm talking about all this, but like a lot of my like daily kind of routine or like the way I kind of conduct myself is very like separated from music. And I think that's actually really helpful for me. Like most of my friends are not in music. They're completely unrelated. They do different things, and yet like they are the most inspiring to me. You know, having time with them or having calls with them, that's what I really struggled with when I moved to the States, because I had that time with them a lot in Australia. And then coming over here, yes, we, you know, they're great and we call and we do all that, but it's just a little bit different from having that kind of like weekly hangout, talk, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So on that side, I've kind of always had a very healthy group around me and kind of routine. I am a fairly good judge of character, so like I can see like problematic people from like kind of a while away, and I'm like, no disrespect to them, but I'm just gonna like do my own thing and like, you know, do you and whatever. But I have had moments in my career where like I have been approached by like people who want to be a part of my team, and I've kind of gone, thank you, and I respect it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there was some that happened very early, and they were offering me a lot. They were offering me, you know, very big advantages, and you know, I've even seen some of the artists that they've taken on that have done really well for themselves. But there is not like one regret that I have by not, you know, choosing to work with them, because, you know, I could have all the, you know, money or big shows in the world, but if I have to kind of, I wouldn't get there having to deal with that kind of mentality every day and surrounding myself with those kind of people.
And you were really, I imagine, trusting just your gut feeling around that.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember like years ago before I ended up with Harrison, I kind of, it wasn't meant to be a management contract, but it kind of ended up being it. And I remember when I was like in this room signing this contract, like I signed it, and in that moment, like in my gut, I was like, God,
you felt
this does not feel, you know, I was like, this does not feel right. Anyway, it was an absolute disaster. So
I mean, that's so big. You got to pay attention to that. You know, it's
yeah.
It's funny because, you know, this is the Headliner Mindset podcast, and so much of what I've been focusing on lately is the mindset stuff. But it's like there is this other wisdom that lives inside of you.
Yeah.
It's not from your brain. It's not from the you know, this computer system that we have up in our skull. It's like it's in your gut. It's in your body. It's just that deeper feeling. And so I think as much as we need to have a good head on our shoulders, we also need to have a good relationship to our intuition and to our gut as well, which is comes from a different place.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, I have read and seen some interesting studies on that. This is like this could be a whole nother podcast or whatever.
Let's go there.
Because apparently it's about like, it's kind of like the whole like first impression, and it is your brain analyzing a few tiny little things that you see first off. You know, it's obviously not always wired correctly. But it's kind of interesting how people choose not to listen to that. I'm a fairly analytical person, and it's funny because I'll be sitting next to someone and we'll meet someone for the first time and someone go, oh my God, isn't that person just like amazing? And in my head, I'm like, there are so many red flags going on there, but I'm like, you know, it's like, well, you know, you have to wait and see, and it ends up being a massive red flag, but it just kind of depends on how tapped into it's also like being tapped into yourself and your gut to like really listen to that, because some people don't listen to that sort of thing and just like kind of are looking outwards at other elements.
Well, that's also been the best way that I've learned, is oftentimes when I don't trust it, and I'm like, you know, I had that gut feeling, I didn't listen to it, and then I find myself in a situation, I'm like, shit, man, you knew this was going to happen, right? And those are actually some of the biggest learning lessons as well. It does still strengthen that relationship, because then the next time I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember what happens if I don't listen to this, so let me trust it this time. Yeah.
And it's so reassuring when you did listen to like the good gut feeling. I mean, I'm very measured. It takes me along, like I'm not a spur of the moment decision maker. Like I'm like, everything's very like measured. I'm, you know, people will say that I take risks because I'm obviously over here in America, you know, trying to make it as a, you know, dubstep DJ or whatever. But like, everything is very measured. But like, it's funny because there is still that part of your gut that's like, this feels right.
Mhm.
Everything, you know, and now seeing it years on, like say, for example, with Harrison, when we first like signed together, like everything seemed right.
Yeah.
Very much a lot of green flags and blah, blah. And now like years on
Yeah.
and things happen and
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh,
Yep.
like I'll see the way that he handles something and I'm like, that's just spot on.
Yep.
Like,
Trust your gut.
it's just exactly.
that's good.
So
I'm happy.
it's a very good place to be.
I'm happy that you've found a good relationship, because I think that is one of the most important relationships for sure. Is like
Definitely.
you know, your manager is it's like your husband or your wife. You know, you guys are like really in
it's
that.
your person.
It's your person. Yeah. So
you're not in there for a year or two. Like it's long term.
You got to make the right decision. That can be the thing that does it or doesn't.
And they've got to see all parts too. They've got to be there for the shitty and the good parts.
And so I want to reflect this to you, that you have always just been one of the most cool, genuine, humble, chill, badass people that I've known. And I get the impression that it's like people want you to win. Right?
Yeah.
It's like people are just like, we want to see you win, because you're a cool, badass, chill, humble, good person. Like, that's just my reflection. I think that's an important piece and an element here as well, because not everybody is that way, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But like, I'm curious about maybe your personal life philosophy towards, I don't know, just being a human, being a good person.
Like I said, like I'm a very analytical person. I also have I think I have a very, I don't even know. It's also really hard for me to talk about this because like naturally, like culturally as an Aussie, like you're not really like, people don't talk themselves up. So I'm like, like, yes, I guess.
I got you. I will talk you the fuck up all day.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think like, to me, it's definitely, I don't know. It depends how you kind of look at it. You know, there's obviously the one side that we've already kind of delved into, which is like very much this whole motivated mindset. But there's like another part of it, which I've kind of recognized and realized I've had from quite a young age, where I'm I'm pretty secure in myself and I very much know myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like something I underestimated before, but I realize how valuable that is, because it completely impacts how you react in situations and how you interact with other people. When I see some people getting really like, I don't know, wound up about certain things, and like a lot of it I can kind of attribute to like things like insecurities or like, you know, all of this kind of stuff, or people who get, you know, extremely jealous, or people who get like angry and annoyed at other people for all these sorts of things. And like, it's interesting. I think like me kind of like taking time, like I spend the most time on myself, because I think that's the most important when it comes to like you interacting with the outside world.
What do you mean by that? You spend the most time on yourself?
Like if something happens and, you know, I react and it's all a bit of a mess, instead of me going, oh, because that person's a bad person and they did this and blah, blah, blah. Like instead of like putting the blame on someone else, I more like look inside and be like, okay, why do you feel like that?
Yeah.
You know, like
you take ownership.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You know, there can be times where you can take it too far, and I've definitely done that. But in saying that, like, I think taking that approach helps you understand yourself a lot more and understand other people a lot more. And it means that when things happen, like I can see people that get so like wound up in cycles over certain things, which I totally understand. Like things happen, you know, it's not like you're not allowed to have an emotional response to things, but they get so wound up about it that they then can't move forward.
Yeah.
And seeing someone stuck in that loop for years and years and years and years, like that frustrates me. If anything, that was something at the start that I was like, oh my God, that's so frustrating and I can't even see past it. Yeah. Now, obviously it's a bit different, but you know, that comes from a like pushing blame onto outside world and other things and blah, blah. And I'm not saying that it has to be your fault. I'm just saying that like understanding, you know, yourself and your reactions to things help you kind of push past these these blocks and these boundaries.
A huge part of what really started this journey for me of ultimately becoming a life coach and just doing what I do today and being a student of personal development was the very first self-help book I ever read right out of college was a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay,
and
love it.
The very first habit number 1 of being a highly effective person is being proactive as opposed to being reactive, which basically teaches us that anytime something happens, you have the choice of how you respond to it. And most of us, we're just reacting. It's like something happens and we're reacting. Something happens and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And, so many people are just living in victim mindset of it's that person's fault. You made me feel this way, or it's because of X, Y, and Z that I'm not where I want to be. And it's just about taking ownership of, of our emotions and also of our actions of like, no matter what happens, I get to choose how I respond to this. I also get to choose how I feel about this. I get to choose the story that I tell myself about this. And it's so empowering. Like it could literally just be the 1 habit of highly effective people. And you can just read that first chapter and it will change your life.
Yeah, that's honestly really interesting because I didn't really like think about it in like those words, I guess, being proactive about it instead of being reactive. But that, being reactive and being in that kind of mindset literally can stop people from moving forward.
Have you always thought that way? Have you always been like
honestly,
this?
Yeah, I think so, which I like don't really know how, like I have been like that for a very long time. I've definitely had periods where like it has developed over time. It's kind of gotten better over time, but I have also had some periods where it's like, and it's only been more recently where I've noticed like, it's not a regression, but, I have noticed periods where I feel like I'm fully firing and then some periods where like, I'm not firing as much.
It's not a regression. It's you playing life at a higher level.
Yes.
So now
actually, that's very true.
You're just being challenged by new things that you've never been challenged by before. So it might seem like, oh my God, why am I not able to, stay grounded in these moments? But it's like, you're just operating at the next mountaintop now.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's the other thing too. Like moving to the States was a huge, like, I obviously knew it was going to be a challenge, but it really threw me off my axis. Like I experienced things in that move that I've never experienced before in my life. Usually I'm pretty grounded and I can see kind of a path through. And even if it changes as I go, I'm like, okay, let's start here and move forward from there. But there was definitely like a big moment once I moved over here that I was like, I just don't know, which is like very scary for someone like me.
Yeah. What kept you going in that moment?
That's a tough one. Honestly, I don't like, I think at the start I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, there was a bit of fear in kind of like the back of my, I would say back of my head, but it was kind of like back of my gut. Like there was this little bit of fear because I didn't, as someone who is very like grounded and knows himself, I had this period where I was like, oh, like something's going on and I can't work it out. And I was putting things in place to like try to work it out and try to help myself. But like none of it was necessarily working, but I was like, just, like try everything, try all these things because maybe something will work. And I think like a lot of it was like, just patience, like just write it out and see how it's going. And then I think like it all came kind of to a head like on my first trip back to Australia after moving out here. Because when I moved here, it was during COVID. I wasn't allowed to leave. It was weird. I like wasn't allowed to leave Australia during COVID. And then once I finally was like coming out to America, I wasn't allowed to leave America and I wasn't allowed to go back to Australia. So it was this whole like thing. And then when I finally like got back to Australia, I think I did have a moment where it's like, it's not that I didn't keep going, but I actually had a moment where I was like, you need to stop. So it was almost the opposite because I was just like, I just kept going and kept going and kept going. And I was like, oh, just work your way through it. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then it all came to a head and I was like, you need to just stop.
Yeah.
So
I feel that I went through the same thing this last year with coaching, where it's like I'd been coaching and holding space for people for 5 years straight. There hasn't been 1 week that I haven't had a client and a call with somebody about helping them with their challenges and their goals. And, and it was like 5 years of that caught up with me. And I was like, oh shit, I can't hold space right now. I need to take a step out and focus on myself and take care of myself for a minute. And then I can come back. And it was like, I resisted that for so long. I fought against that for so long because my identity was like, I'm a coach. I'm strong. I help people. This is who I am. So it was like, I had to let go and just be like, I got to take care of myself for a minute. And that was the most liberating and powerful thing.
Yeah, it honestly is really amazing. So, I mean, I guess to jump into it and go into detail, when I'd moved over here, first 2-3 months, I was like, oh my God, this is insane and it's amazing and blah, blah. And then, after, it wasn't even that long, to be honest, maybe I don't know, around 2 months or whatever. And then I started to feel this feeling where I wasn't feeling that sense of elation as much as I used to. I wasn't feeling as present as I used to, I used to have feelings of gratefulness every day, constantly. And it was not over necessarily big achievements. Sometimes I'd be walking and the sun would come out and I was like, oh my gosh, how nice is this? Or all of this sort of stuff. And I just noticed I wasn't having that. And then I started to journal. I was like, I hate writing, but I just was like, I'm just going to journal because I feel like if I just write things down, maybe later I can read back and I can process it later. I couldn't quite work out what was going on. But, there was all these little signs and stuff of what was happening. I was super unmotivated. I never wanted to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I was getting really distracted really easily. All of these sorts of things were happening, which is not normally, something that I'd really dealt with. And then I remember going back to Australia and I remember just having these couple of days where suddenly it was just kind of my whole mind just shifted down and everything felt dark. I felt like it felt like every day was fucking cloudy. I just had this weight on my shoulders and I was crying nonstop, just crying all the time. And I remember waking up one day and I woke up. First thing I did was cried and I was like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't know. I just was like, I don't see the point of getting out of bed, which it sounds dramatic to go from, 0 to 100, but it's funny because what happened, actually it must have happened after this because I went to my doctor to talk to him about, it was a checkup because I hadn't been in Australia for ages. I love my GP back in Australia. He's great. And, he's asking questions about everything. We do a yearly blood test to make sure everything's all good. And the year before, or maybe more than a year before, but the year before we'd done a mental health check that we do. And because at the time I was struggling with some physical symptoms that he thought was actually anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out he was right. They were physical symptoms, but turned out to be anxiety. I saw a psychologist and kind of got on top of it, which was an amazing experience in itself. But anyway, so he's like, let's do a yearly check-in. And so I filled out the kind of form and he looked at it and then he looked at me and he was like, if I said that you were, if I said that you feel depressed, does that resonate with you? And straight away, this had been 9 months of I cannot work out what's wrong. And I'm trying to journal and still trying to be so optimistic. And as soon as he said it, the penny dropped and I was like, I kind of just wanted to cry in that exact moment because I was like, holy shit, he found it. And I hadn't let myself admit that even to myself, I guess. And anyway, I spent the next 3 days just crying, didn't want to get out of bed because I think I finally realized this is what's going on. And then from there it was okay, this is something real that we're dealing with. And it was finally for the first time I said, take a step back.
Yep.
Don't worry about music. Don't worry about your career. Don't worry about anything. I was back home in Australia and I was like, spend time with your friends and family and also tell them.
Yes.
Tell them what's going on. And not only that, but you can be sad in front of them. You can cry. You can be vulnerable because I'm not that type of person with most of my friends. I'm a very open person, but usually it's I'm the one that they come to for advice. And I'm like, yeah, it's all good.
Yep.
And even if something's going on with me, I'm like, yeah, but it's fine, blah, blah.
Yep.
And I was like, just let yourself be the way you are. And honestly, that moment for me was like, it was strange for me. It was like very much a first experience, but I was like, it was also like very relieving.
Yes.
Because it was like something that was sitting there for so long that I wasn't giving space to. I was like, no, just work your way through it. Just, if you journal, you'll be fine. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, it came all crashing down, which was like, as crazy as it sounds, it's kind of a blessing that it did.
Yeah,
so.
For real. Wow. Our stories are so parallel.
Are they?
Yeah, I mean, just from.
I mean, I'm sorry to hear that,
yeah,
but like,
also
cool.
But at the same time, I'm not sorry, because I experienced my first real, 2 months of this last year where I was like, I got hit with like real ass depression. I'd never had really had it before, but it was so tough to get out of, like, because normally I'm like, oh, let me just like, go hit the gym. Let me go. I got my things. I got my tools.
Exactly.
And it was like, the universe grabbed me and just shoved my face in the mud and was like, no, motherfucker, you're not getting up from this one. You're going to stay here and learn the lesson that you needed to learn. And the big lesson for me, and we hear it all the time, it's okay to be not okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard that so many times, and I'll say that to people. I'm like, yeah, I get that. But had I actually ever allowed myself to be not okay myself, because I'm like, I'm the guy that takes care of everybody else, right? I'm the guy, I'm the coach, I have all the answers, I'm the athlete, I'm strong, I'm a man, I'm masculine, all this bullshit programming and ideas. I was like, I actually needed to fully allow myself to just break the fuck down and be not okay, and then also experience what it's like to be supported by other people. Truly supported by other people for probably the first time in my life.
That's scary as someone who isn't normally in that position. Yeah. It's definitely, it's a scary position to be in, for sure.
It's scary, but how do you feel being on the other side of it?
Honestly, like it's awesome. Like, I mean, I'm grateful for that experience. Right. It was insane.
Yeah.
And it turned me from like, before that, I was like, I felt very confident. I was like, I got my shit together. I know myself. I know this thing called life. It's hard sometimes, but it's not so bad. And then that happened and I was like, holy shit. Like, I felt like I went from like being an adult straight back to being a fucking kid. Yeah. Like, I was like, I don't know shit. You know what I mean? Like, I just was like really kind of, which was interesting and cool. And now being on the other side of it, like, I'm not gonna lie, like there's still parts of me that's like a little bit wobbly, because it did like, I was like,
rocked your world, like, for sure.
Exactly.
Same.
Definitely. But in saying that, like being on the other side of it is like, it's really cool, because I learned so much about myself. I definitely was always someone that like sat there and like helped others and could advise other people. But like, it's completely different when you start like experiencing things for yourself. And it also like helped me understand where my priorities are, and like, I don't know, that it's okay to be vulnerable and to go to people like that. And there is, people that can, well, I mean, you need to build this, I guess, for yourself. But I had people around me that can hold me up, and, them holding you up doesn't mean that you can't also be there for them as well.
Nobody can hold you up until you allow yourself to be vulnerable and be honest about where you're at and reach out for help. And I'm so glad that the conversation went here, and I really want to acknowledge you for being vulnerable and sharing this part of your story with us, and allowing me to share my part of my story, with everybody as well, because I think it is such an important conversation to have. Obviously, there is a big conversation around mental health for not only artists, but just mental health for our society in general, right? Like, we're all like, there's just so much shit going on. And it just starts with us having some of these honest conversations, being honest about where we're at, as much as, I think part of the headliner mindset and having the focus and the drive and the grit and the determination and the process and all of these things that we need to have to perform at the highest level and achieve our goals. Just as much of that, we also need to have this other piece around mental health and having these conversations, taking care of ourselves, making sure that we're taking care of the machine, right? If we want these machines to operate at the highest level, we also really have to do this other part, which sometimes gets skipped over.
Yeah, and I think like I don't know, it's definitely a very like interesting thing to look at because like part of it for me that I really struggled with too was like at the time I was like, how could I possibly tell people that I feel this way because everything is going amazingly for me in my career. You know what I mean? And honestly, sometimes there are moments where you have to kind of unfortunately in the world that we kind of or the position that we're kind of in, there is like a right and a wrong time to say things. And I know that sounds I don't necessarily want it to be that way, but I'm not going to post about some huge crazy sellout show and say I felt super depressed in this moment. You know what I mean? But in saying that, like as from artists to other artists or high performers, like it's okay to be in the most successful part of your career and not be okay. The big thing that really shifted in my mind was I used to think that like the goals, say I had set a goal or there was like a big achievement that I was about to experience or that I had just experienced. I used to think that they were the moments that I would feel the best and the most elated and I would have those feelings of success. But something I've come to realize is like those moments don't have to be the periods that you feel the most elated. And to be honest, like for me, they're not usually the moments that I actually feel like I've achieved the most. And those moments come from other times for me. Like sometimes it's like, sometimes I taught a production workshop when I was in Denver. And I remember in that moment, I was like, holy shit, like it wasn't even in the moment. It was the next morning. I walked out to get like a boba or tea or something. And I was walking back and I was just like, holy shit, like that's when I felt elated. I was like, that was amazing that just happened. That day I played at Red Rocks in front of 9,000 people and you would think that that's the moment that I should have had it. But it was actually, when I was walking down the street, after doing that workshop and I was like, wow, that's a moment. Or, sometimes it's like I have this little like park near my house that I walk around and, I spent the morning like doing some work, made my breakfast, like paid my rent, went for a walk around the park just to like take a break from the studio. And in that moment I was like, wow, like look at you, you know what I mean? Like you're on the other side of the world and you have a really cool daily routine and you've kind of like created this really cool life for yourself over here when you thought that you would never be able to. So it's kind of a message to artists that like you don't necessarily have to, or not even artists, like high performers too. Like you don't have to put the pressure on yourself to like, if you don't feel amazing while an amazing moment for your career is happening, like that's okay. That's not necessarily how it, who says it has to go that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
so
very, very profound lessons. Thank you for sharing that with us and just for pointing out, I think, some of these sort of universal fundamental truths that ultimately, happiness comes from within. And, we see people that are
very zen,
killing it and achieving goals and have every, all of the abundance in the world. And but they're also still oftentimes very unhappy. So, we've got to look at a different place.
Definitely.
Sippy, thank you so much for being a part of this amazing conversation, being a part of the podcast, and just joining me today. What a rad conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to see you continue to kill it out there.
That's what I'm going for.
Let's go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.